This book, The Hare and the Easter Eggs by Alison Uttley, with pictures by Margaret Tempest, was first published in 1952. I have owned this charming book since I was a little girl. One evening in spring, Hare was dancing along the fields, skipping and tripping and bowing to the rabbits, when a sudden thought came into his head. Of course, as it was the month of March, he was feeling excited and wild, for all hares are mad in March, and our friend Hare was no exception. "I'll go to the village," said he to the world. "I'll go and see what there is to be seen and tell them at home all about it. I feel very brave tonight. I don't care for nobody." He stuck a primrose in his coat for luck, and a cowslip in his collar for bravery, and he cut a slim hazel switch with catkins dangling from it, just in case. "Now I can face anybody," said he. He went loppety-loppety on the green pathways. He leapt high over a stile, and he sprang on his soft feet over the briars that tried to hold him back. "I'm not afraid," said he, as he swished his holly bush with his stick. "I'll look at the village shop and see if Mrs. Bunting and the shop bell are still there." It was dusk when he reached the village, and the children were indoors having tea. Not even a dog or cat was to be seen. Hare leapt softly and swiftly down the cobbled street, with a glance at the cottage where the old lace-maker lived, and a peep at the blacksmith's, and a wink at the white horse on the green. He gave a chirrup of joy when he saw that the shop was still open. Brushes hung at the door, and jars of sweets in the window shone with many colours in the dim light of the lamp. Hare crept close. It was a lovely sight. Whips and tops, dolls and toy horses, cakes and buns were there. Then he opened his eyes very wide, for he saw something strange in the medley of toys and food. On a dish lay a pile of chocolate eggs with sugary flowers and "Happy Easter" written upon them. Ribbons were tied round them in blue, pink and yellow bows. "Eggs! 'Normous eggs! Eggs brown as earth! Beautiful eggs!" whispered Hare. He stared and licked his lips. "What kind of hens lay these pretty eggs? Ribbons on 'em. What would Grey Rabbit say? I should like to take her one, and Squirrel one, and me one." He pressed closer to the glass, and his long ears flapped against the pane. Then footsteps came down the street, and he slipped into the shadows and crouched there, dark as night. His fur quivered and his heart thumped. "I'm a mad March hare," he told himself. "I won't run away. I will be brave." A woman stopped at the shop window so close to Hare that her skirt brushed his flattened ears. She smiled when she saw the Easter eggs. She lifted the door latch and pushed open the door. A loud tinkle tinkle came from the bell hanging above it. "The bell's still there," thought Hare. "It's telling who comes into the shop." "Good evening, Mrs. Bunting," called the woman as she stepped inside. "Good evening, Mrs. Snowball," replied Mrs. Bunting, popping up from behind the counter where she'd been tidying her stores. "Those are nice Easter eggs, Mrs. Bunting," said Mrs. Snowball. "How much are they?" "A shilling each," replied Mrs. Bunting, and she reached the dish from the window and set it on the counter. Hare crept into the shop and stood by Mrs. Snowball's skirts with his nose raised, sniffing at the sweet, strong smells of onions, chocolate, and new bread. Mrs. Snowball chose her egg and began to talk about Easter and the new organ and the church decorations. The two women chatted, and Hare moved round. He stretched out a furry paw. He took a leap, and he snatched a chocolate egg. In a moment he was gone, out into the dusk. "Oh, oh!" cried Mrs. Bunting. "What was that?" "I didn't see anything," said Mrs. Snowball. "Was it a cat?" "I don't know what it was. Something took an egg," cried Mrs. Bunting. They both ran to the shop door, but Hare was already far away, running like the wind. "You can't catch me," laughed Hare, capering along the fields, and he squeezed the egg under his arm. Then he stopped to look at it. His warm fur had softened the chocolate, and his fist went through. He brought out a little fluffy chicken made of silk and wool. "Not real, but a good pretence," said Hare. He licked his paws and then licked the egg. "Oh, luscious, delicious!" he cried, and soon the egg disappeared. "That's the best egg I ever tasted," said he, and he galloped across the common and dashed into the little house where Grey Rabbit was cooking the supper. A candle fluttered its yellow flame, and the fire crackled comfortably on the hearth. Squirrel sat there making the toast. "Here you come at last, Hare," cried Squirrel. "What have you been eating? You are brown and dirty." "Not dirt, Squirrel. It's chocolate," panted Hare. "You'll never guess." "Guess what?" asked Grey Rabbit. "I've eaten an egg laid by an Easter hen, and it was made of chocolate," said Hare proudly. "Nonsense!" snapped Squirrel. "Chocolate egg?" cried Grey Rabbit. "Where was it?" "In the village shop," said Hare. "I took it right under the nose of Mrs. Bunting." "I shall go and pay for it," explained Hare. "It was a shilling." "You took an egg, and you ate it all yourself?" said Squirrel. "Greedy Hare!" "I brought you the ribbon, Squirrel, and the little fluffy chicken inside the egg is for Grey Rabbit," said Hare, bringing the ribbon and the chicken from his pocket. Squirrel tied the ribbon around her waist, and Grey Rabbit stroked the toy chicken. "And did an Easter hen lay these?" they asked. All evening they talked of Easter eggs, and the next morning Squirrel spoke to Hedgehog when he came with the milk. "Have you ever seen an Easter egg, Hedgehog?" Hedgehog set down his pails and rubbed his head. "If it's not a new laid egg, nor an old laid egg, and not an egg poached by that rat, and not an egg somebody is scrambled for, I don't know what it is," he said. "You'd best ask Wise Owl." After breakfast the three locked the door and set off for Wise Owl's house. They couldn't wait till night, so they had to wake the owl from his sleep. They rang the little silver bell, and they stood in a row under the tree waiting for him. "Who's there?" hooted Wise Owl very crossly. "Go away, or I'll eat you." "Please, Wise Owl," began Grey Rabbit, waving her handkerchief for a truce. "We want to know," added Squirrel, stammering with fright. "About Easter eggs," shouted Hare in a loud voice. "And who lays them?" whispered Grey Rabbit. "And where we can get them," faltered Squirrel. "Chocolate ones," shouted Hare. "I've a good mind to tell you nothing," said Wise Owl, frowning at the noisy Hare. "But remembering the primrose wine and thinking of eggs you will bring me, I'll speak." "Yes, Wise Owl," said Grey Rabbit meekly. "Yes, Wise Owl," murmured Squirrel. "Hoots and toots," snorted Hare. "Easter eggs come at Easter for children and good rabbits, but not for hares," said Wise Owl. "The church bells ring and the little birds sing and the sun dances on Easter morning." He blinked and yawned and went to bed, banging his door so that the boughs shook. "He won't tell us any more," said Grey Rabbit. "Let us go away quickly before he eats us." Grey Rabbit and Squirrel went home, but Hare leapt aside and ran across the fields. He tapped on Mole's door and kicked it with his toe. "Mouldiwarp, quick! Are you at home?" he called. "What's the hurry, Hare?" asked the Mole, coming quietly round the corner with his spade. "Oh, Mole, I didn't see you." "Can you lend me a silver penny or a gold penny or anything?" he asked. "What's it for?" asked Mole. "For a secret, a fine secret. I owe a silver penny, and if you could give me an extra one, Mouldiwarp," said Hare. Mouldiwarp went into his underground house and brought up a fistful of gold coins. "You can have these if you'll do something for me," said he. "They are real gold. I dug 'em up in a Roman field one day when I went to see Badger. I've got a bucket full of them." "Oh, thank you, Mouldiwarp. You are a real friend," cried Hare, stuffing the coins in his pocket. "I have a fancy for some eggs," said Mouldiwarp. "You know the Speckledy Hen better than I do." "I'll bring you some at once," said Hare gladly. "I'll go to old Speckledy Hen. She knows me." Speckledy Hen was in the meadow scratching among the daisies when Hare came up. "Please, Speckledy Hen, can I have some eggs for Mouldiwarp?" asked Hare. "I wanted to give Grey Rabbit my eggs," said the hen. "Why should I send them to the Mole?" "He wants them very special," said Hare. "Do please let me have them, Speckledy Hen." "Very well, as it's nearly Easter, I will," said the hen, and she filled a basket from the store of eggs in the barn. "These have been laid by my friends, but my own new-laid egg is for Grey Rabbit." Hare carried the eggs to Mole. "I'm going to be very busy," said Mouldiwarp. "Don't come here again, Hare. I'm getting ready for Easter." He carried the eggs indoors and shut the door. "I've got a secret, a secret, a secret," sang Hare, leaping towards home. "I've a fine secret, and this is the first time I've told nobody. Nobody knows it, not nobody." When he got to the little house, he kept jingling the coins in his pocket. "What makes that jingle-jangle, Hare? What's in your pocket?" asked Squirrel. "It's a secret," said Hare, "a precious secret." He took out his watch and shook it and altered the fingers to make the time pass more quickly. "I'm going out again tonight," he announced. "Mind you don't meet the fox or the weasels," warned Squirrel. "You'll take care, won't you?" asked Grey Rabbit. "There's a moon, and hares always go out by moonlight," said Hare. As soon as tea was over, he started. He took the way to the village, for he wanted another look at the Easter eggs, and he intended to pop a gold coin inside the shop door. He had some difficulty in getting into the shop, for children were looking in at the window, and he had to wait till they went away. He kept out of sight, and when all was safe, he darted across the road. "One for Hare, and one for Squirrel, and one for Grey Rabbit, and one for Hare, and one for Wise Owl, and one for Hedgehog, and one for Hare, and one for Fuzzy Pig," he murmured, counting the eggs. "How many is that?" "I can only count up to 7. He began again. "One for Hare, and one for Grey Rabbit, and one for Hare, and one for Hare, and one for Hare. I'll wait till somebody comes along and Mrs. Bunting opens the door." He leant against the door, but it was not fastened, and Hare's fat little body fell inside the shop. "Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle!" cried the little bell in its shrillest tone. "Tinkle, Mrs. Bunting, tinkle!" "Oh dear!" cried Hare. "Why can't you be quiet, little noisy bell?" "Tinkle, tinkle!" rang the bell. "There's a hare in the shop. Come quickly." Mrs. Bunting heard the jingling bell, but she stopped to take the kettle off the fire in the back room. That gave Hare his chance. He dived into a brown jug which stood near. It was such a big jug he was completely hidden, and he fell on his nose with his legs curled around him. Mrs. Bunting looked over the counter suspiciously, and then she went to the door. "Drat those children! They're after my Easter eggs," said she. "Well, it's time to shut up shop, and I'll go to bed early." She locked and bolted the door. She took the money from the till and turned down the lamp. Then she went to the back room and shut the door. Hare stood on his head in the jug. He heard the sounds of doors and shutters, but he was too busy trying not to sneeze to bother about them. There was something very sweet in the jug, and he took little licks as he waited. He had jumped into the treacle jug, and the thick syrup was over his mouth. He ate it and licked his face and whiskers dry. "A fortunate place to come, for I've had no supper," he thought. Slowly he pushed up his long ears, his round head, and his astonished eyes. There, watching him, sat a fine tabby cat. The two stared hard at each other. "A tabby," murmured Hare. "My whiskers, a tabby." "A jugged hare, as sure as I'm alive," said the tabby. "Good evening," said Hare, and he scrambled out and made a deep bow with his paw on his heart. "Gracious me!" exclaimed the tabby. "It's Mr. Hare, as I've heard of. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Hare." "At your service, ma'am," said Hare politely. "You were jugged, you know," said the cat. "What are you doing here? It isn't safe. If my mistress saw you, she would jug you, and no mistake." "I'm here to pay a debt," said Hare haughtily. "I've come to—" "Hist!" cried the cat, and Hare leapt back in the jug as the door opened and Mrs. Bunting appeared. "What is it, Puss?" she asked. "Come along and have supper with me." "Meow, meow," cried the cat, retreating to a corner. "Oh, very well. Perhaps there's a mouse," said Mrs. Bunting. "I'll bring your milk." She fetched a saucer full of milk and shut the door. "You can come out now," whispered the cat. "She'll go to bed soon." Hare climbed out, clutching the gold coin which he had dropped from his pocket. He still felt rather nervous. "I've come to buy some Easter eggs," said he. "Here's the money." "This will buy up the shop," said the cat. "We never see any gold, only shillings and pennies." Mrs. Bunting's footsteps thudded up the stairs to the bedroom over the shop. "Now we can talk," said the cat with relief. "I want to hear about you and Squirrel and Grey Rabbit. I'll get you a bite to eat first." She fetched some sausages and ham from the counter and sugary buns from the window. "Eat these, Hare," said she, and Hare gobbled them up. He told all his adventures and many more, and the cat thought he was the bravest, boldest animal she had ever met. The evening wore on, and the moon peered through a chink in the shutters and smiled at the sight of these two hobnobbing together. Wise Owl came hooting over the roof, calling "Too-it-too," and Hare told about him. The fox came snuffling outside, and Hare told about him too. The weasels squeaked as they ran down the street, and Hare told of them and their tricks. Then his head nodded, and he slept. Dawn came with the crowing of cocks and the clamour of the alarm clock, and Hare opened his eyes. "It's time you were off, Hare. Mrs. Bunting gets up when the alarm sounds," says the cat. "I'll open the door for you." Hare packed the Easter eggs in a basket, while the cat deftly drew the bolts and unlocked the door. The little bell was all ready to cry "Tinkle, tinkle," but the cat was prepared. "No, you don't," said she, and she wrapped a duster round the clapping tongue. "Now you can't speak." Puss opened the door, and the sweet morning air came pouring in. The bell shook and leapt on its spring, but never a sound came. Hare poured his gold coins on the dish and seized the basket of eggs. "Goodbye, Mistress Tabby," said he. "Thank you very much for your kindness." "Meow, meow," answered the cat. "Puss, Puss," called a voice, and Hare saw Mrs. Bunting in her dressing gown. "Puss, have you opened the door? What have you been doing? Puss, where are the Easter eggs? Puss, who put that money there?" Hare didn't wait any longer. Grey Rabbit and Squirrel were fast asleep, but they had left the door unlocked for the truant to enter. Hare hid the chocolate eggs in the empty beehive down the garden, and then he crept into bed. "Naughty Hare, we thought the fox had got you," called Squirrel when she heard his steps, but Hare just rolled over and went to sleep. "Easter eggs," he grunted. "Easter eggs." "Would you like an Easter party?" asked Grey Rabbit after breakfast. "We will invite our dear friends to see the sun dance on Easter morning." "Oh, yes," cried Squirrel. "I'm always ready for a party," yawned Hare. "I had one last night, but it's a secret." "I'll make some Easter cakes, and you shall send the invitations," said Grey Rabbit, getting down the yellow bowl. She made a heap of tiny cakes, each in the shape of a moon, with caraway seed on the top. Squirrel and Hare scribbled the invitations on primrose petals. Squirrel was a poor writer, and Hare couldn't spell, so they put the letter E and nothing else. Robin had to explain E was an Easter party as he delivered the letters. Squirrel had knitted an egg for Grey Rabbit. She made it of blue wool, and she stuffed it with nuts. "A present for Grey Rabbit. She will be surprised," said Squirrel to herself. Rat had carved a little bone egg which opened. Inside he put a wooden thimble for Grey Rabbit and a few thorn pins. "She will like this," said he to Mrs. Rat. On Easter morning, Grey Rabbit, Squirrel and Hare went to the garden in the early light, but already the birds were singing their Easter hymn. Hare was very excited about something. Grey Rabbit wondered why he kept looking at the beehive. "We haven't any bees, Hare," she reminded him. Footsteps came pattering down the lane, and little voices could be heard singing carols and songs. "We didn't invite all these," whispered Squirrel. "They've come by themselves," said Hare. "Please, Grey Rabbit, we've come to wish you a happy Easter," said the small creatures of the woodland in a shrill chorus. "A happy Easter." "A happy Easter," replied Grey Rabbit. Away in the east, the sky was bathed in golden light, and rosy clouds floated above the rising sun. All the animals gazed into the sky, and they saw the great ball of the sun come up from behind the hills and dance to and fro that Easter morning. Then Mouldy Warp brought his basket of coloured eggs. "These are magical eggs," said Grey Rabbit. "How ever did you make them, Mouldy Warp?" Rat came forward with his bone egg, and Grey Rabbit opened it and found the thimble and pins. "How clever of you to carve this little Easter egg," said Grey Rabbit. Squirrel offered her queer knitted egg, crooked and fat, and Grey Rabbit hugged her friend. Next, Old Hedgehog and Fuzzy Peg came with duck eggs, and the Speckledy Hen brought her own new laid egg. All this time Hare had been dodging backward and forward, glancing at the beehive and then going away. At last he lifted the straw skep and brought out the chocolate eggs. Grey Rabbit, Squirrel, Hedgehog family, Speckledy Hen, Mouldy Warp, and all, "I wish you a happy Easter," said he. On the grass he spread the chocolate eggs with their bright ribbons and curly lettering, and everybody cried out in surprise and pleasure, "Chocolate eggs! Chocolate eggs! Easter eggs! Easter eggs for children and rabbits!" "But not for hares," hooted Wise Owl, flying over. He dived down and seized an egg. He pierced it with his beak and brought out the fluffy toy chick. "Bah! Not real! A trick!" he snorted, and away he flew. Hare mopped his forehead. Fuzzy Peg came from the lavender bush. Old Hedgehog uncurled from the ball into which he had rolled. The Speckledy Hen came running back from the hedge. Mole, who had dived into the earth, came up wiping his hands. Squirrel came from the shelter of her spreading tail. Grey Rabbit took the apron from her face. "Where did these come from?" she asked faintly. "I bought them," said Hare. "I paid for them, and Mouldy Warp gave me the money. They are from Mouldy Warp and me." Mouldy Warp looked surprised, and he stroked one of the eggs. "Soft as velvet, sweet as honey, and writing on it," said he. "Bought with Roman gold, these eggs." They sat on the ground in a circle and drank tiny glasses of primrose wine and ate bits of the Easter eggs. "A happy Easter," they said to one another, holding high their glasses. "We should like to hear how Mr. Hare was able to get these wonderful eggs," said Old Hedgehog. "Did you poach them, Hare?" said Fuzzy Peg. "Did you scramble them?" asked Rat. So Hare told his adventure, and they all thought he was a very clever hare. "Of course I am," said Hare. "I always knew it. I've been telling you for years, but you wouldn't believe me." And that's the end of this lovely story. Now I can tell you that these books are now back in print again. So if you enjoyed this story, why not search for more books about Hare, and especially you might like to buy this one, The Hare and the Easter Eggs by Alison Uttley, with pictures by Margaret Tempest. Thank you for listening.